Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I'm Joycey Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about increasing contractualization of workforce in India. Now coming to the current affairs, there is an increased contractualization of the workforce in India. It means that more number of employees are employed on a contract basis, that is for a short period of time. And in this context, it is essential to understand what are the reasons behind increasing contractualization of workforce and what measures are necessary in order to make this situation fair and favorable for the workers. So we will discuss all these details in detail in this lecture, but before we begin, this is our channel StudyIQ and we are providing pen drive courses for various competitive examinations including SSC and bank courses, UPSC optionals, SSC JE courses, teaching examinations, railway examinations, defense examinations, RBI grade B, NABARD grade A, UGC NET, UPSC Civil Services Examination, CLAT exams for various state PSCs and also for various professional courses. You can visit our website www.studyiq.com for more details, or you can call to any of these numbers for more information. Now let us first understand what is the share of contract workforce in India. So as we said in the beginning, contract workers are those workers who are employed directly by a intermediary or a contractor. So contract workers are not directly employed by the employer, but instead there is an intermediary or a contractor who would employ these workers, and this contracts would be for a short term. So there is no fixed tenure or there is no security of tenure for the workers who are employed on a contract basis. Now, according to the ASI, the annual survey of industries published by the CSO, it shows that there is a surge or an increase in contract worker usage in the organized manufacturing sector. So, in the organized manufacturing sector, there is an increase in the proportion of contract workers. Now, according to the statistics, in 2001, it was 7.7 million. Now, in 2015, it has increased to 13.7 million. That means around 2 times. Now, if you look at the share of contract workers in the total employment, it increased around 28% in 2015. And the share of directly hired workers fell around 61% in the same period. So, we will see that there is a more demand for contract workers and lesser demand for directly hired workers. So, now let us understand what are the implications of this. The rise in the use of contract workers indicates that there is a significant informalization in the organized workforce. So, informalization means the rate of formal workers under formal working conditions are coming down. And according to Labour Bureau's Employment Unemployment Survey in the year 2015-16, they have brought a social aspect to it. So we will understand what is a social aspect towards informalization of workforce. So as per the social aspect of informalization, contract and casual workers have higher shares of society's vulnerable caste groups as compared to regular workers. So, the vulnerable groups in society is considered to be the scheduled caste, the scheduled tribes, women, other backward caste, etc. So, the Labour Bureau suggests that there is a caste and class relationship with that of informalization of workforce. That means those who belong to the vulnerable caste groups are more employed in the contract and casual work than the regular workers. So such type of proliferation of informal alternative work arrangements also deepens the labor market segmentation. Segmentation means dividing labor market into different segments. Now let us understand what is the relationship between rigid labor laws in India and the informalization of work in India. Now, one major argument in this regard is that the widespread use of contract labor is because of India's rigid employment protection legislations. For example, the Chapter 5B of the IDA, that is Industrial Disputes Act, makes it necessary for the firms employing more than 100 workers or 100 employees to obtain the permission of the state government to lay off the workers. So, this is a rigid labor law. So, an ongoing debate is whether these rigid labor laws are the reason for this increasing informalization of work. Now, we will understand and analyze whether it is true. Now, we have seen the chapter 5B of Industrial Disputes Act, which makes it necessary for those firms who employs more than 100 workers to obtain the permission of the government if they have to lay off the workers. So here we will understand that if the labor regulations are the only factor driving contractualization, the contract worker intensity should be higher in labor intensive industries, because the number of labor is set to 100 if the employer has to take the permission from the state government. So informalization should have been more in labor intensive industries. And also, such type of informalization should be largely affected in those states which have relatively rigid or more rigid labor regulatory environment. But if we look into the data of the last 15 years, the contract worker usage has sharply increased in capital intensive industries. So, the capital intensive industries have more informalization of labor and not in labor intensive industries. And also we will see that the labor regulations in India in fact have become employer friendly over the last 15 years in order to improve the ease of doing business and also to support the Make in India initiative. The government has always been pro-employer and employer friendly so that the labor laws have become less rigid and more flexible for the employer. For example, various amendments were made by several state governments since 2015 in order to raise the threshold to which the IDA or the Industrial Disputes Act applies to 300 workers. Earlier it was 100. Many state governments have amended it to make it 300 employees. So these are all some employer friendly measures taken by different state governments, and even the union government, in a view to promote the Make in India initiative and in order to improve the ranking of the country in ease of doing business, the state governments and the union government has largely tried to make the employment regulation laws favorable for the employer. So we cannot say that rigid labor laws are the primary or the most important reason for increasing informalization of workforce in India. Now let us understand what would be the other reasons that necessitates contract works undertaken by the employer or informalization of the workforce. The major reason is that the contract workers receive almost half the wages that are given to employees or workers who are employed directly by the firms. So the wage differential for the contract workers is very significant. So if the firms hire contract workers, they will make a significant savings in their cost of production. They will receive fewer employee benefits compared to regular workers. So in case of benefits and in also with regard to the wages, the employer will be able to make certain savings in the cost of production. So this will allow the firms to reduce the cost and to improve the competitiveness. By reducing the cost, the firms will improve the competitiveness. Also, the presence of contract workers acts as an alternative workforce to the firms, and it will also help the firms to suppress the bargaining power of the regular employees. So the regular employees, they might be involved in some trade unions, so together they have a bargaining power. In case of contract workers, they are not permanent employees and therefore they do not have a bargaining power with the employers. So in that case also the employers benefit out of contract workers. So we can say that it is largely the profit motive of the firms or the employers in hiring more number of contract workers compared to regular employees. Now let us understand what is the way ahead or what should be done. The Contract Labour Act prescribes that the contract workers are entitled to same wages for the same kind of work as regular workmen. So it is important to ensure that the wages of contract workers are at par with directly hired work. So the wage differentials of the contract workers with that of the regular workers needs to be corrected. And also the Contract Labour Act prescribes that contract workers should not be engaged in core and perennial activities as per the law. But we will see that Due to larger informalization of work and increase in the number of contract workers, they are also engaged as substitutes for regular workers in the core sector and also in the perennial activities. So, the changing nature of the contract workers and contract works includes contract workers in core and perennial activities, and therefore it is important to review the Contract Labour Act. And also the law prescribes for decent conditions of work and also provision of social security benefits for the contract workers. So, none of these provisions of the law are adhered to. So, there should be stricter implementation of the law and stricter monitoring whether the firms adhere to the provisions in the law. You can find the PDF of this lecture on my Facebook page, and also you can follow my Facebook page for more video updates, and please write to me at joyce.studyiq.com for any of your queries and suggestions. Thank you.